Hi, everybody. This is Andrea Honigsfeld.
And Maria Dove.
And we're very excited to contribute to Virtuel 2018. Today, our presentation is going to focus on going beyond the basics.
With co-teaching for English learners.
Well, that's our main topic.
Of course.
So you could see some of our publications here. We started working on this topic in about a decade ago.
A little more than that,
maybe more than that. So we're very excited to summarize a few key points for you today. So by virtue of introduction, I started co-teaching in New York City as an ESL teacher.
And I started co-teaching in Valley Stream, New York, a suburb of New York City. And we have had many different experiences, Andrea and I, with co-teaching on many different levels, both on the elementary to high school to the college level and graduate education.
Today, we're both employed by Molloy College, which is what we like to say the best kept secret of Long Island. And we continue to research, publish, teach, present.
And do a lot of coing.
We do a lot of coing. So we're very happy to co-facilitate this webinar for you as well.
So here is our very ambitious agenda in this short time we have with you. So we're hoping to define collaboration and identify shifts in individual and school-wide practices needed for successful collaboration and co-teaching for English learners. We are going to apply these strategies to co-plan lessons to support the integration of content and language instruction. We're going to determine what co-teaching is and is not, and identify some key elements of leadership support.
So in the corner, you see our original 2010 book, which was developed into a 5-page leadership article in which we define collaboration. In this article and in our original work, we define collaboration as part of a collaborative integrated service delivery for English learners that includes instructional and non-instructional elements. Some of the most important instructional collaborative practices that we often talk about are joint planning, curriculum mapping and alignment, parallel teaching, co-developing instructional materials, co-assessment of student work. Co-teaching is, of course, an integral part of it, if possible, and joint professional learning. But I think, Maria, you have a new definition that you just recently...
We're working on our second edition of our first publication, Collaboration and Co-teaching. And here is one definition we've created about collaboration. So effective collaboration among educators is a goal-centered enterprise that focuses on student achievement as its main objective. It encompasses targeted discussions, analysis of data, standards reviews, the co-construction of essential curricula, lesson planning, the development of assessment tools and techniques, and the thoughtful examination and re-examination of instructional delivery. It is sustained via the support of committed teachers, empowering school administrators, as well as the development of a general school culture that reinforces the practice. It requires the building of relationships, including the use of effective communication skills, purposeful participation, and respect for others.
Well, I really love that.
I think
you really took it to the next level. We've done a lot in the past 10, 12, 15 years, so you could certainly see how our own practice and own thinking expands as well.
I think this has come also from our research.
Definitely.
And our work in the field. This is our definition from what we've seen that really works with collaborative practices.
Absolutely. So we're going to take you through a couple of important shifts, almost like do this, not that, or change or shift some sort of practice. So let's start with a name. What is in a name? When we talk about pushing or pull out type of services for English learners, there is this pushback against these terms. And if you see the diagram also illustrates how there is some sort of physical interference just with the natural flow of instruction for English learners.
I just love these illustrations because they really do identify how sometimes teachers feel when they're pushing into a class, they're invading someone's class, or that pullout is removing students from an environment where they are learning and then pulling them into another environment. So that needing to leave to learn.
Exactly. It's also sending that message to the kids that you do not belong there, or a very strong message to the teacher that you as a teacher won't be able to handle those kids. So try this. We coined this term based on a lot of research. We have to give a shout out to Ellis Vertura and Colin Kapper and many others, George Theo Harris, who started talking about integrated, collaborative service delivery. And then if you do have a standalone program, name it standalone or English language development period rather than push in or pull out.
The next is professional identity. And the idea of that there is a specialist that there, or versus a classroom teacher, that the specialist has this special ability to teach special students, such as English learners. And the classroom teacher has no understanding of how to go about teaching these students. So instead, our thoughts move towards the idea of you have two teachers, and they both have their own skill sets. And when they work together, they also helped to acquire each other's skill sets.
Absolutely. So collaboration and co-teaching, we have found, could be considered among the best ongoing professional learning opportunities. The two teachers work together, constantly bouncing ideas of each other, embrace each other's efficacy, and develop collective teacher efficacy, which is certainly a very powerful construct. So positioning, if you happen to co-teach, this might sound really interesting to you. Instead of the ESOL teacher positioning himself or herself in the back of the room, we would invite you to consider occupying every possible spot in that classroom and both teachers teaching, facilitating learning from everywhere.
Well, quite honestly, we often find that when the L teacher comes into a classroom, they tend to slip in on the side. And they're waiting for the classroom or content teacher to finish a sentence, or he or she doesn't want to disturb the class. And it's quite nice when we see examples of when the L teacher comes into the room and the kids are stopping what they're doing and acknowledging the teacher coming in, and they greet the students together in front of the room, and they really position themselves as two teachers, and the students have two teachers.
Yes. So let's revisit the collaborative instructional cycle that we have talked about in the past in our previous webinars through Virtuel 17. This consists of 4 parts: co-planning, co-teaching, co-assessment, and reflection.
And we're going to review each of them?
Yes, I think we're going to address mainly based on our agenda. We're going to talk about co-planning, co-teaching, what it is not. We're not repeating what we have done in Virtuel 17 because you could go back to that recording.
Okay. All right.
Yes. But we're going to shift our focus based on some input that we solicited on Twitter, which was some special requests to address administrative support and some additional ideas about co-planning. So let's jump right into it.
Okay, now co-planning, we always say, is essential. It's a non-negotiable. If there is no co-planning, there is no co-teaching. And that's just the basic understanding of the practice. You can have 2 teachers in a room, but that's just shared real estate. If the lessons aren't planned together, there is no co-teaching. So instead of having planning on the fly, once in a while, we happen to cross each other in the hallway and we could speak for a couple of minutes, or the old you plan and I follow, we're going to suggest that you try this.
Well, integrating co-planning into the school sends a very strong message to teachers that this is a top priority, that this is systemic, it's sustained, it's integrated, it's part of the way we do business here. So this is a leadership support piece as well. Co-teaching cannot exist or thrive. It could exist, but it couldn't really thrive without administrative support and systemic support. It has to be also student-focused. When we plan, we could be talking about the curriculum, certainly, or that could be a separate meeting, but focusing on student needs, group of students, as well as individual student needs is very important. When we think of co-planning, as I just mentioned a moment ago, it could be divided into two different types of co-planning. A team approach would allow a group of teachers, the grade level teachers, or the content specialists as they get together with the L specialist, to focus on the curriculum, on the what. When individual co-teaching partners like you and me get together, we could focus on the how and the who. This divides up the labor, the focus, and makes co-planning more impactful. And finally, using technology. So this day and age, being able to tap into any kind of web-based file sharing system is, again, a non-negotiable. So we'll have to encourage teachers to share files through Dropbox or Google Forms or just about any other platform that they feel comfortable with.
And the beginning of our presentation, we mentioned how Andrea and I co a lot. So we co-author, we co-present, and we have to share these files. We do a lot of our work at separate locations. So we basically happen to live in Dropbox.
This is actually pretty a special treat that we're together in the same. This is my office here, so we're really enjoying this beautiful space here at Malone. So let's continue.
Okay. So we like to identify a routine for co-planning. And the reason for routine is that when teachers know what to expect from a particular activity, it is most often more successful. And we find that teachers who adhere to some type of a co-planning routine, they have more success and more mileage with their co-planning. So there are 4 steps to our co-planning routine. And it goes like this: organization, pre-planning, co-planning, and post-planning. We're going to review some of these steps with you. We're going to review all of the steps with you, sorry. Okay, the first is organization. And the idea is to first identify what platform you're going to communicate with. Is it going to be email? Again, going with Google Docs, Dropbox, all the technology that you have. Andrea and I often text message each other. How are you going to communicate with your co-teacher? The next with organization is to make sure that you have all of the necessary material in order to communicate with one another. So as the teacher of ELDS, I might be co-teaching in a social studies class. So I would like to have the scope and sequence, the curriculum map, the standards, as well as any textbooks or online resources that the social studies teacher has.
During pre-planning, we are not together. So we each look at the curriculum map, the scope and sequence guide, and we determine the academic demand and the linguistic demand of the upcoming lesson or unit. When we finally get together, that co-planning time, we often say, is very precious. So we need to be even more organized and carefully prioritizing our time, what we're going to be doing, what we should be deciding on the overarching goals and objectives, and the main activities during the lesson, as well as some sort of formative, or if it's at that point, summative assessment for the unit.
And then you're never done planning.
No.
So in the post-planning phase, the co-teachers are not together either, but often the work has been divided up in the co-planning session. So that's a time for materials to be developed and any other information that needs to be prepped during post-planning.
Yes. So we also borrow from WIDA to offer this summary chart of sensory supports, graphic supports, and interactive supports as a sort of guiding framework for co-planning. When co-teachers get together, we invite them to make a commitment that every single lesson will have at least one item from each of these columns. So one sensory, one graphic, and one interactive support.
Which resource does this come from?
This comes from the Essential Actions book, so it's on the WIDA website if anybody would like to look this up. And here is something very unique we would like to share with you. It's published in one of our books. Mara Berry from Kildare Country Meadows School in Illinois and her team took co-planning to the next level by drafting co-planning agreements, or sometimes it's more elaborate and they call it a partnership agreement, in which they determine what the classroom teacher and the language development coach, another name in that district for the ESL teacher, would do to commit to this co-planning success. They also spell out what the pre-planning, co-planning, and post-planning commitments are.
I like that you had said at a previous meeting about what the language development coach was.
Yeah, so this is a very unique situation. In most districts that we visit, we meet ESL teachers, L teachers, EL teachers, ELD teachers, ENL teachers in New York. So just about any acronym that you can imagine. But in this particular school district, not just renaming, but redefining the role of the ESL teacher by using the language development coach title really empowered these educators. This title alone, to me, recognizes that language development occurs for every single child. It is not just an L and non-L, but recognizing that language development, academic language development, is for the entire class. The second point of this name or title that I appreciate is the coaching piece. So where language development is a process, and we are often facilitating rather than directly teaching English. So facilitating language development as well as supporting each other. So being peer coaches, being in that peer support or teacher leadership position is also recognized by this name.
And we also want to recognize that the curriculum of the integrated instructional class for English learners really needs to be an integrated one. And so this chart comes to us from John Nordmeyer, who talked about how to integrate language and content in the co-taught class.
So when we co-plan, this chart, this diagram, to me, is a reminder that our main goal is to provide access to grade level understanding for English learners. But at the same time, we also have to ensure academic language skill development, because the challenge is twofold. English learners need to learn a new language, and they need to learn the content in a new language. So by integrating these two perspectives or these two lenses, and when we work together, we can do it more productively because of the joint expertise that we bring to the table. That's how we're going to achieve success for English learners.
So what is co-teaching? We happen to love this definition from Agatha Vitale. She's a high school teacher. She's not a researcher or an author. And this is how she came to terms with the definition of co-teaching. She said, it's an honest, comfortable, trusting partnership, accepting and respectful of different styles of teaching and respectful of different areas of expertise. There is no more mine or yours, only ours. What I like about this particular definition is her double use of the word respectful. Mm-hmm. And we often hear that from teachers, how respect is so very vital for a co-teaching partnership to thrive.
And it also leads to that other important word in this definition, I think, which is trusting. Mm-hmm. So without trust, without trusting each other's expertise, and without firmly believing that together we could do something uniquely different for the sake of English learners. So elsewhere we have already discussed this many, many times, but just a little bit of a refresher, or if you happen to be new to our work, a little short introduction to the way we define 7 models of co-teaching. The first 3 models focus on keeping all the children together. That's what's indicated in the name of these models. And then we define what each of the 2 teachers are going to do. Sometimes one leads while the other one teaches on purpose or offers immediate intervention. Sometimes both teachers teach the same content, very much what you're hearing us do for you. And sometimes one teacher will be offering direct instruction or small group instruction to the whole group at the same time, but just spot checking, while the other one is collecting assessment data.
The next three models, models 4, 5, and 6, allow for two groups of students. But in model 4, most often the two groups are fairly even. And the grouping strategies that are used very often is one that is heterogeneous. Mm-hmm. So the idea of this model is to reduce the student-teacher ratio and allow students to have greater access to a teacher. Another way to use model 4 is to group them homogeneously. And in this way, the teachers can use different tools and different levels of language to teach the same content. So that's one really powerful way to use model 4. Models 5 and 6 are very similar. They only have one letter that's different. The letter is P. So the difference between pre-teach and reteach. And what we've often observed is that this is small group instruction, either prior to the lesson or to spiral the curriculum and reteach students in Model 6. And sometimes what we've seen is that there are larger groups that need the pre-teaching or reteaching than the ones being taught alternative information. And people always have questions about what is alternative information.
Well, the word of caution here is not to go ahead in the curriculum, but to go deeper into the curriculum. So alternative information is never recreating or enlarging that achievement gap or opportunity gap to learn. So it is an enrichment approach to teaching.
Mm-hmm. And then model 7, multiple groups. And the two teachers both monitor and teach. And what we've seen is the typical special education model with 3 groups where Andrea would take a group, I would take a group, and then one group would work individually. And then the students would rotate between the teachers. Or we've seen upwards of 8 groups. Sometimes one teacher will be stationary with one group and one teacher circulates. Or we've seen multiple groups where both teachers circulate and they monitor and teach. So this is a very flexible model, and it's a choice of many teachers, co-teachers who are just starting out with the practice.
So if you look at this diagram, it shows so many options, maybe almost overwhelming the number of options that we have here. So the word of caution here is not to stick to one model, but combine them and use them in an effective way.
And in a fluid way. We find that teachers who are experienced will shift in and out of 2 or 3 models in one particular lesson with ease.
Yeah. So what is co-teaching and what it is not? If you are listening to this webinar, you might want to just pause the webinar and jot down what your experience is with these two concepts. Co-teaching, what would you like to see co-teaching defined or enacted as, and what are some non-examples of co-teaching? And if you pause your webinar and you return in a few minutes, we're going to give you some possible answers that we collected in various workshops.
So here are some ideas about what it is. Teachers have very strong feelings about it being a joint responsibility. And the idea of using pronouns such as our and we, so it's our class and we teach together. The idea that there is co-planning involved. And again, no co-teaching without co-planning. The idea of sharing the learning, the successes and the false starts. So that reflection piece is very strong in the co-teaching practice. Having good communication skills as well as trusting one another, and we've mentioned that before, as well as decision-making and joint problem solving.
Now, what it is not, just some of the things that we would not want to see, such as taking turns teaching. I teach for 20 minutes while you sit down.
And drink some coffee.
Yeah, that too. And then you come back on and teach and I'll sit down. Or even marking papers in the back, doing something that would be the opposite of joint lesson delivered. So this idea of my kids, your kids, my group, your group, or I'll plan and you teach, or the other way around.
I love this. You teach, I'll drink coffee, mark papers that you just said.
Yes. So that's not the kind of sharing that we think about. Another big concern, if there is no time to plan, then anything can go. There could be, of course, creative flow to a lesson.
Oh, absolutely. And you can, and sometimes you want to stop the lesson you planned and change course completely, and that's perfectly fine.
Yet without entering the classroom with some very clear ideas about what's going to happen, it will not be as impactful as you were hoping it to be.
I like the last one.
Yes. Yeah. So that goes back to building trust and building a strong, reflective, supportive relationship. That neither of the two co-teachers should ever feel that whatever happens in that room will be reported to an administrator or supervisor. So it's not about that at all. So going back to those shifts a little bit.
So instead of one or two preferred models, especially ones that require the ESOL teacher or L teacher to merely assist, we want to see multiple models of instruction so that each teacher takes on different roles and responsibilities, so that even the typical classroom or content area teacher is the one in the supporting role. That really establishes that equity between the two teachers, and they can become a powerful resource for all the students in the class.
Absolutely. The grouping, I think we mentioned this earlier, moving away from the my kids, my group, your group, my lesson plan, your lesson plan. Instead, when we place children in various groups throughout the co-teaching models, the decision where those children will be placed should be based on assessments, flexible grouping principles, and the student's actual needs for that particular lesson.
Student assessment. Instead of teachers assess their own students only, we have found the most successful co-teaching teams assess all the students. And a particular co-teaching team that we've known for many, many years, they've been together, they say that this is a vital practice, that the fact that all parents are meeting, both teachers, during parent-teacher conferences, that both teachers know all the students in the class really makes it a powerful team approach.
So if you think of it, what co-assessment means, it would have to be considered on multiple levels. On the one hand, it is co-developing the assessment measures, the rubric, the assessment tasks. If there's a quiz or test or performance-based assessment, co-creating those assessments is step one. Then step two is co-delivering the assessment measures. So being in each other's presence, or both of us watching as the kids are demonstrating their skills and knowledge. And finally, monitoring and responding to students' needs jointly. Whatever we gain, whatever information we gain from the assessment data, we have to confer with each other and then make decisions based on that. So again, we're going to ask you to pause the video or the webinar and think about all of your shifts that you might have experienced in the past or you are planning to engage in the coming school year. So instead of doing A, what will you or you personally be doing?
Last but not least is leadership support in the in schools where there is a culture of collaboration and strong leadership. We find that the student outcomes are the strongest. So support is needed for this practice, for it to really thrive.
So the three major points we'd like to make here is, number one is humble inquiry, which could be translated into an administrator understanding that we have more questions than answers. So let's engage in learning about English learners, about the community, the ever-changing community that we work in. Let's learn from each other and tap into the tremendous expertise that exists in every building. So an administrator to embody this concept of humble inquiry would also lead to joint problem solving. Yes. So rather than having all the answers, we often claim that we would never ever say we have all the answers regarding collaboration and co-teaching. We constantly learn, we constantly explore this topic, and we see very strong results in communities, in school communities, where there is a strong professional learning community where they practice joint problem solving. And on top of it all, regardless of the leadership style, fearless advocacy against all odds.
It's like almost like a social justice issue.
It is. It really is.
To really do what's morally right for students who need support of these type of practices.
And moving away from these children being marginalized, being on the sideline or ignored. So collaboration leads to a more inclusive, more supportive, more integrated service delivery for English learners.
So consider these as some questions for you to consider as you ponder some of the ideas that we've shared with you today. So what are your top 3 priorities now when it comes to developing a program of collaboration and co-teaching for English learners?
If you're still not at the end of your school year, if you're still teaching in your region, what work needs to be done from now until the end of the school year?
Or what are some long-term goals for the coming school year?
If you are on Twitter, which we hope you are, you could use the Virtuel18. We'll go back to that for a moment. So the Virtuel18 hashtag, and reflect on your insights and share what you have learned and what you have practiced.
And please join us on our websites. One is coteachingforels.weebly.com, which also has a link to our other website developed specifically for integrated ENL, which is English as a New Language in New York State.
And visit us on Facebook.
And Twitter.
And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.